The night the lights went out in Georgia, a suitcase full of ballots and a surveillance video. Is it real? Is it fake? Is it fraud? Is it not? And does it even matter? It's Rob Nelson Live. All right, hey everybody, thanks for watching the Friday night show. As always, we're interactive, live and interactive. So if you're out there on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or Reddit, so our favorite platforms, love your comments. I don't always get to the comments right away, but I'm going to get to them. I might interrupt a little just to get to them. I get on a roll and I just get rolling. Then I'll come back and get everybody's comments. But I love your comments, good, bad, and ugly. So let's get right to it. The suitcase video, the night the lights went out in Georgia. So if you're old enough, even if you're not old enough, you might know it's a famous Vicki Lawrence song. I think it's from a movie, but either way, you know, it's the night the lights went out in Georgia. I shouldn't be singing. It's oh, you know what? It's Liberty Valance, I think. I don't know. They killed an innocent man. That's the night they killed an innocent man. Okay, well, in this case, it's the night they got the surveillance video of these big suitcases of votes. Now, here's the thing. I'll get to why it doesn't actually matter what really happened, but let's start with what we think happened, okay? And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Everybody who watches this knows that. I'm Mr. Like practical about it. So I'm going to say right off the bat, I don't know what was in those suitcases or if it was fraud. Here's what the one side says. The one side says they told the observers to leave. The observers left. They said they were done for the night, and then they continued to count. And at one point, you see this woman with blonde, like, you know, ponytails, braids, dragging these suitcases out. It's funny if you watch it. I mean, it looks pretty shady. It looks pretty shady, let's be honest. My first thought when I saw it was, well, it looks pretty shady. But, you know, who knows what was really in those ballots? I mean, you're watching part of a surveillance video. You know, it's shady if you ask the people to leave. And then you keep counting. That alone is pretty shady, right? Why'd you ask them to leave? Now, and then you're pulling these suitcases out and dragging them out. It sure makes you think like you stuffed a bunch of votes in there and get rid of them. Whoop, here's the Trump votes. Bye-bye. This was in the State Farm Arena, Georgia's State Farm Arena in Fulton County, which is Atlanta, which is very Democratic. So, of course, the one side says, okay, see, gotcha. The other side says, no. Their response today was, no, nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see. Keep on going. We did nothing wrong. We didn't ask anyone to leave. That's suspicious. They just left on their own. I don't know. The observers just packed it up and took off. And there was nothing irregular in the suitcases. Okay. And, you know, Rudy Giuliani presents this to the Georgia State Legislature, says this is what it is. The other side says it's not. I'm going to interrupt myself. I'm going back and forth with Crafty on whether or not to like take comments in the middle. Monkey Arms, good to see you. Haven't seen you in a minute. Yeah, I agree with you, Monkey Arms. First of all, I agree. Bring them in and question them. I mean, it is not fake footage, Monkey Arms. Nobody's disputing that it's actually a surveillance camera and that's real. They're saying we have the whole surveillance camera footage and it shows them doing nothing wrong. So here's the issues of dispute. One is the one side says they told us to leave. We're done for the night. This happened in a few places. We left. They kept going. The other side says we never told anyone to leave. And, oh, FYI, we're not required to have them there by state law to count. That's not a great response. Okay, it's a pretty hotly contested election. You want them there to count. Like, oh, but law didn't say we had to have them there. So we weren't breaking the law by counting after they left. And we didn't tell them to leave, although they said they did tell them to leave. And you got to wonder why the observers would leave if they were still counting. Because, again, hotly contested election. So on that one, I kind of lean toward the side that says something shady happened. On what was in those boxes, they say nothing wrong with what was in those boxes. They were votes that had already been counted and processed. Okay. Excuse me. Maybe that's true. So I think there's an easy answer to this. I think you drag those, you find those boxes, bring them back in and see what's in them. The real issue here is not whether they did or didn't do this. Not to me, it's not. The real issue here is twofold. One is the second, I'm going to go two first, is what this really means past this election. And first is what it means for this election. So let's take one. What it means for this election. Well, hi, Cotton Myron. I messed up. Hi, Cotton Myron. Is what it means for this election. Okay, first of all, if they can prove that this was fraud, and they can show that, it means a lot. It means a whole lot. My whole argument this whole time has been, and I've had some people challenge me and say, Rob, you keep saying there wasn't fraud. I want to be clear. I never said there wasn't fraud. There was fraud. There is always fraud. I mean, let's face it. If you want me to give you a history of fraud, I mean, there's been fraud going back to like the election of like Jefferson and Jefferson and the guy who died, the vice president who died in the shootout. It goes that far. Aaron Burr. It goes that far back. Accusations of fraud, people. 1876, they were like threatening, like bring in 10,000 people and force them to vote. It was Rutherford Hayes versus Tilden. Nobody knows who Tilden was because he never made it. He didn't win. Most people probably don't even remember who Rutherford Hayes was. It was like 1876. I mean, fraud has been going on forever in our elections, and accusations of fraud even farther than that. So when people say, "Oh, we have no fraud" or whatever, come on, be realistic. We have fraud. Aaron Burr, thank you, Monkey Arms. Yeah, I got it. Monkey Arms is on the history book here. There's always been fraud. It goes, and there's always been accusations of fraud. So don't pretend fraud's a new thing or something we haven't had. Even more recently, we've had a lot of incidences of different kinds of voter fraud. I mean, obviously, if you want to know, like Kennedy's the most famous one, right? We know Kennedy's, they stole the election in Chicago and tipped the scales, so he won Illinois. That's even his historians who are favorable to him acknowledge that happened. They say Kennedy had nothing to do with it. Of course, his father, Joe Kennedy Sr. did, who was a mobster, basically, and they pulled strings, and we know that. We know they found the evidence. So that's one. Lyndon B. Johnson, unless well-known one, there was no proven fraud in the election for his presidency. Well, remember, he first becomes president because Kennedy's assassinated, and then wins a first term, whatever, finishes that, gets elected. But his Senate race, which got him to the presidency, was stolen. And there's no question either. Robert Caro, his biographer, who's, Pulitzer winner, prize-winning biographer, and really likes Lyndon B. Johnson. There's a whole thing on how Lyndon Johnson stole the Senate election. And they basically had dead people voting. It was dead people voting. It was him running against the governor of Texas. And they had dead people vote. And they caught it. They caught the votes. They caught the whole thing. They dredged it up. It went to court. And on a technicality, Johnson had his lawyer go and file a petition to say that it was being heard in the wrong courts. It was a federal versus state issue. So to get it thrown out of the court channel it was in and get it put in another one, arguing, that essentially it wasn't a federal issue, And by the time they had switched the courts, which they had a legal challenge to do, it was sort of too late. And Johnson won. But everybody knows he stole that election. And he rewarded the lawyer who did that by making him a Supreme Court justice. How's that for getting good payback? Of course, he's the only Supreme Court justice, I think the only one of only two, to be impeached for corruption. So, guess it was running thick. But anyway, Nixon, busting in Watergate, which now seems kind of trite, but, they busted in on the Democratic National Committee headquarters to get him at Watergate. Boom, we got you. Shamore, Johnson owned radio stations. It was his propaganda machine. Yeah, not only did he own radio stations that were his propaganda machine, but he also used the power of the presidency and the Senate to give out FEC licenses to radio stations based on who gave him things he wanted, which included money. He made a fortune off radio stations as an elected official. So he not only used the radio stations as a propaganda machine, he corruptly used his power to give out FEC broadcasting licenses depending on who he liked and who gave him money. I mean, Johnson was probably the most corrupt president in modern history, if you want to come right down to it. a genius politician, super corrupt. Nixon was corrupt. Again, Watergate, they still, tried to bust in and get the DNC stuff. There has been corruption in every single election we've ever had. I don't know, maybe maybe not the first one. No, there probably was too. You know what? George Washington, again, you can look this up. George Washington actually had a business partner who they used to, and they were getting land grants. You could get a bunch of land, it's like a settler type thing. And they used dead people to get more land. They took dead people's names through their company. I mean, yeah, so much for, I will not tell a lie, chopping down the cherry tree story or whatever. Most politicians are corrupt. Let's just be honest. And people try to steal elections because this is an election to the most powerful office in the United States. I don't know what the Marika Award is. Gave Marika Award. You have to tell me what that is. So, of course, people are going to play dirty politics. They always have. Jimmy Carter probably did it because remember Jimmy Carter did the interview in Playboy and he confessed that he's cheated on his wife in his mind. He's had thoughts of other women. It's like, oh my God, you're human. In any case, there's been maybe Ronald Reagan, but their operatives cheat. So to say there was no cheating is ridiculous. Now, how far and widespread was that cheating? Way more widespread this election than in the past. And I'll tell you why. It's pretty simple. Because we allowed mail-in ballots without a lot of signature verification. It's really that simple, you guys. If you just allow people to not prove who they are and send in a ballot, you are going to get corruption, whether it's individual or coordinated. Because you got ballots going everywhere. People can harvest those ballots. They can collect them in batches. You can have people vote who don't live at the residence anymore. You can have somebody other than that person vote with that thing because all you got to do is sign the form. You don't have to match a signature to it. It's got to be the right address. So that alone creates a massive opportunity for fraud, not to mention who knows what you could do with systemic technological, type fraud with voting systems. We know fraud happens. We know it. They've said it. Stop politicizing the fact that, no, there's no fraud. There's fraud. How much fraud? Don't know. But bigger than that, how much is provable fraud? Because in our legal system, if you can't prove the fraud, then nothing happens. You got to be able to actually show they did it. So the suitcases, you got to show what was in those suitcases. Just moving suitcases by itself doesn't mean there was fraud. Something shady going on that they kicked the observers out. But so you go and you find out. But the point is we turn this into an argument on two sides where one side says no fraud, the other side says massive fraud that wiped out the election. Okay, the reality is there was fraud. Lots of fraud. How much? Was it enough to shift the necessary votes? I don't know. And we may never know. It may never be proven or come to light the extent of the fraud. But silencing people who say there was fraud, that's its own kind of fraud. People say there was fraud. Oh, be quiet. It's false information. It's not false information to say there was fraud in this election. There was fraud. There is always fraud. And there's provable fraud. Is it provable enough to sway the election? Now, here's where it might get a little interesting. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of Florida, put out a thing. It was kind of interesting. And basically, her take is one of two things is going to happen, but this is going to the Supreme Court. If this does go to the Supreme Court, if some piece of this goes to the Supreme Court, one of two things can happen. One is that they will declare unconstitutional ballots that were improperly received through mail-in. That could mean invalidating votes that were received. They made rules that were not constitutional, which people operated on thinking they were okay to do. I'm not talking about stuffing things in boxes. I'm talking about the voters. So I love it. Their motto for years: vote early and vote often. It's a joke, but that was something that people did used to joke about. But again, I'm not throwing one side under the bus on this. Republicans have cheated in elections too, right? It's you vying for one of the most powerful positions in the world. You think you going to just believe what they tell you? You think there's not corruption? How naive could you be? This is one of the singular most powerful human beings on the planet who gets that office. You may hate Donald Trump, but of the 7 billion people, he's one of the 20 most powerful on earth. Of course, people will cheat to get that office. Of course they will. I mean, House of Cards is made up, but it's not made up. We won't even know the length to which people probably go and have gone to cheat and get elections. Okay, be honest, Monkey Arms asks, if you had to guess, flip a coin, who would I guess would be more fraudulent, Trump or Biden? You know what? I'm going to give you a dual answer on that, Monkey Arms. I think Biden's campaign, I think they were probably more fraudulent. I think Trump is probably more fraudulent overall. I mean, Trump's played the game his whole life. You know, Trump doesn't get a corruption-free pass by any means. And as I've said before, I don't think Trump is some great guy. I think Trump's in it for himself. You know, my dream president is not Donald Trump. He is somebody who's a you know, ball busting, you know, bull in the china shop wrecker of institutions like Trump, but he's a person with empathy, you know, or she's a person with empathy. I almost got caught there on my pronouns. It's a person with empathy, a he, she, or non-binary pronoun with empathy, and who is capable of unifying as well as blasting. But that said, I think Biden's campaign was more likely to be corrupt because part of it's the big cities. Big cities have often been a seedbed of corruption, you know, and you have that. You've seen it throughout history, you know, the political, you know, back Chicago, New York, you know, they literally had, you know, back in the day, you know, Mayor Daley of Chicago had an entire operation. I mean, it was corrupt to the, you know, to the bone. So I think a lot of times you get built into big cities and into big organizations, a lot of corruption. And most big cities are Democrat run. So it makes sense that you'd have more likely corruption. You have corruption in the school unions. You know, you've got corruption in most of the local politics in Chicago, New York, you know, Los Angeles. You're going to get corruption. And that's those big Democratic strongholds. So it's not crazy that you would see more corruption in Florida. Pantaloons, lovely pantaloons. I'm off the deep end. I don't think I'm off the deep end, but you know, yeah, it's okay. We are the losers here because you've been pitted against one another. Yeah, I do think we've been pitted against one another. And I'd like to go back to that comment that I'm off the deep end. I mean, again, I would challenge you to go before you throw that out at me. And I can take the insult, but I'm not off a deep. Why am I off a deep end? Because I'm arguing that there's corruption and fraud in every presidential election? I worked in the White House. I worked for President Clinton. I sat alone with the president in his living room. I accompanied him to event, and you know, I've, you know, drove in the motorcade to the event, not in the car with the president. I've watched the president walk into the White House with Secret Service and one top aide and nobody else. I've overheard, listen, I saw stuff that went on. I saw things that I could see that when I was in an inner circle of people, I was working for one of his top aides, but I saw and heard things. So when you say I'm off the deep end, I'm telling you my own experience. I saw things that were corrupt. I saw things that were unethical. I saw the attempts people went to play power. So it's not off the deep end to suggest there's fraud or to suggest that it could be widespread, particularly because we had mail-in voting, which again, you know, you can call me off the deep end. I'll call you naive if you don't think the Democrats knew exactly what they were doing. They knew mail-in voting would lead to more votes for them. And they knew part of that would be because there would be votes that shouldn't be there. Whether they coordinated that or not, they knew it would happen. And again, if you think they tell you the truth about everything, well, you're the one off the deep end because they don't. Trust me, having worked in Washington, having worked in the White House, having been around some of the most powerful people in the country for years, I guarantee you they don't tell you everything that they're doing. They don't tell you half of what they're doing, and they cover up everything they can. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen is, one, the Supreme Court, if it hears it, will throw out the unconstitutional ballots. And that could include, like I said, ballots that were cast by people thinking they were legitimately cast, but who in fact were casting them based on a law that was unconstitutional. So where a governor changed the time frame at which votes could be received going against state law and the state constitution, They could invalidate, much the way Lyndon Johnson had the Supreme Court. Nobody said Lyndon Johnson didn't cheat to steal his election. Abe Fortas, who was the guy, his lawyer at the time, who he made Supreme Court Chief Justice later, Abe Fortas merely argued it was in the wrong venue, state versus federal. And so they threw it out and had to go back through. And by the time they did, it was like all lost in the wash. So again, the court could invalidate the votes that were received by people who thought they were voting okay, but whose the voting law itself violated the Constitution and was done, in a way that went around the state legislature, that kind of thing. But the second thing Attorney General Pam Bondi says is, and this is the one that I think is a little more out there, but is interesting. The court could declare the election invalid. That's a long reach. Monkey arms, you're diverting me, but I'll go there. Ever spend time in a backwoods good old boy neighborhood? Yeah, I'm not sure what that means. A backwoods good old boy neighborhood? Are you talking like back door?
Probably a reference to the South.
Behind the closed doors? Are you talking about behind smoke-filled rooms? I grew up in the country, if that's what you mean. So the good old boy. No, I think you're referring to the Good Old Boys Network. I could be wrong. Okay, anyway, what could happen is the Supreme Court could theoretically invalidate the election based on evidence of fraud. That's a long shot. And I'd say to most Trump loyalists holding on, you're smoking something, even Pam Bondi, if you think the court's going to do that. On the other hand, Brett Kavanaugh sitting on that court, he could lean that way. But in that case, what would happen is the Constitution provides for that, and in that case, the Congress votes on who the president is. Lovely Pantaloons heating it up here on me. What the fuck are you talking about? Stop reading truthjusticefreedom.org or whatever alternate news you follow. Okay, Lovely Pantaloons. I like your name, but you're doing something that I find, whatever. I don't actually read truthjusticefreedom.org. I get my information from all different sources. It sounds like you only read the source you want to believe. You read the source that tells you what you want. I actually read magazines from the left. I read The Guardian. I read Politico. I watch CNN. I watch MSNBC. I watch Fox News. I read Breitbart. I read BBC. I read foreign press. I look at news from all over. And I also base things on my own experience. So, if you want to tell me my experience of being inside the White House with a president who is a Democrat and seeing and hearing things that would be considered not so good is false, you can. You want to tell me my experience is invalid, that's fine. It's my experience, but it's a real experience. And again, if you also go back and read history, it's not right-wing history to the degree to which most presidential elections have been filtered. Kennedy's biographers acknowledged that the election in Chicago was stolen. Johnson's biographers, favorable biographers, acknowledge that his election to the Senate was stolen. It's provable. So you don't have to agree with me, but don't think just because I say something you don't like, I'm somehow reading some kooky conspiracy theory stuff. I'm not. And I'm telling you, this could go to the Supreme Court. I'm not saying it will, but the court can choose to hear these cases. And if they do, they can make a decision. One decision they could make is to invalidate votes that they do not think were fair. And that would include votes that were voters voted thinking they were voting okay, but the law itself was unconstitutional in that state. That's not right-wing propaganda. That's legal fact. The second thing they could do, which I don't think they will, is invalidate the election. That is a provision in the Constitution in that case where the electors, people don't even realize a state legislature can direct the electors to vote for somebody else. I mean, you think it's like bulletproof. I voted, it goes there. Technically, a state legislature could order its electors' votes to go to a different candidate. And this stuff's happened in the past. If you go back and read history, that's what I'm talking about in all these elections where they tried to barter votes and tried to move who went where. We just got this notion that it's this clean thing. I hit a button, it votes, it went for the person, it's done. The electors actually can be moved. I'm not saying they would be, but a Republican legislature, if they thought there was enough fraud, could go, we're directing the electors another way. The Supreme Court could do it similar. I don't think they will, but they could. And if they did do that, it would go to the Congress, which would mean the House would vote for the president, which would not mean it would be Biden, because it's not based on the members of the House. It's based on the state delegations, the actual state delegations, of which there are more Republican than Democrats. I think it's a very long shot that Joe Biden is not president. So for anybody who thinks I'm drinking the Kool-Aid here, I'm not. I don't actually know whether those boxes or suitcases were full of stuffed ballots. I'm not saying they were. I'd be perfectly open to seeing that they weren't. To me, either side could be right on that one. But my point is there's a bigger issue here, and that's what I want to take this to. The bigger issue at stake here is that whatever happens, and I do believe it's going to be Biden is. And by the way, just a sidebar, Al Gore was essentially certified as president for 37 days before the Supreme Court overturned and flipped it and flipped Florida back to Bush, which is why a lot of Democrats say the election was stolen. Again, remember, both sides do this. So, lovely panelists, your side has done it too. Whenever they lose, they say the other side cheated. Stacey Abrams in Georgia accused her counterparts of fraud and cheating and refused to concede the election for like a year. And the media loved her. They made a little idol out of her. They encouraged her. She's running a big voter organization now, And the Democrats claimed the election was stolen in 2000. And Hillary Clinton claimed the president, and Democrats claimed that Trump was an illegitimate president, that he was not legitimately elected. So don't pretend this is just suddenly Republicans doing this. Both sides have done it. I read the Weekly World News. You know what, Fort Walton Beach? I might have to start reading the Weekly World News too to get. Hey, you know what though? Do you see that sidebar thing? The leaked reports from the Pentagon about the UFOs? So Weekly World News might not be so far off. They leaked this stuff about these unidentified flying objects, which keeps getting leaked out. But essentially, they classify a couple of these things, and they're like, they know it's an object, they know it's flying, and they go, one possibility it is non-human. It's a non-human piece of technology. And they just sort of matter-of-factly put it out there, but they're not like it's crazy. They're like, well, one explanation is that it might just be a non-human craft floating around. That's leaked. That's not, again, not me reading right-wing crazy propaganda. Go and look it up. It's, just somebody inside the Pentagon is leaking top, secret stuff about UFOs. So Weekly World News might not be that far off. So here's where this goes, guys. The thing is, whatever happens, and I think it's Biden as president, and maybe he should be. But I don't know, because I don't know how much fraud there was. I just know there was fraud. But either way, I've said it before. Trump got more votes than any president ever before, and Biden got more votes. More people voted. This is a divided country around this right now. And what is happening because of all this stuff is, and because one side refuses to let the other side claim there was fraud or that there were irregularities or that some of this isn't fair, when that same side 4 years ago claimed that it was not a fair election and that Trump was not a legitimate president. And all these things coming up and being censored. Censoring only makes people think it's more true. The best thing Facebook, Twitter, social media, and anyone on the left could do is go, come on, bring it on. Put all your claims of fraud out there. Put them out there. Put them all out there. We'll actually amplify them. Let people see them. And let's see if they're true. Because the minute you keep going, no, it didn't happen. Shut up. I don't want to hear it. You're crazy. You're drinking right-wing Kool-Aid, censored, false information, posting, warning, this tweet might not be. The minute you do that, you make the side think we must be right. It's like telling a kid they can't do anything. Don't drink, don't have sex. What are they going to do? Go do all those things. We're the worst kids in college, the ones that were told they could never do anything in high school. The best ones are the ones that parents were like, listen, just be safe about it, okay? You know what? If you're gonna drink, why don't you just call us? Why don't you have your friends over here? I mean, we don't want you to, but better that. Why don't you make sure we drive you, get you an Uber, right? That's how it works. So by censoring it, it only amplifies people's conviction that it's true. And it may be, but it may not be. It may be exaggerated, but you're only making them more sure they're right. How's that helping? And what this will do is we will go into a presidency, no matter what happens, and I think it will be Biden, we will go into with an entire half of this country convinced that not that this was stolen because Trump said it was stolen. Stop thinking like Trump says it's true. Trump says stuff, and yes, a lot of people listen, but people think for themselves on both sides, and they do tend to follow their leaders, media and political. But at the end of the day, something didn't smell right about a lot of things here. And because of that, something was smoky. And because of that, and the attempt to repress people for saying that is going to lead an entire half of this country to be outraged and convinced that this election was fraudulent. That is a bad thing. That is not because Trump is saying it was fraudulent. Trump has every right to claim it was fraudulent, just as Al Gore did, just as Hillary Clinton did. So everybody who's going to go, Trump should shut up. Why didn't Hillary have to be quiet? Hillary called the president an illegitimate president. She argued she didn't want to concede. She said it wasn't really fair. They said all the same things. They didn't take as many things to court. Al Gore, same deal. So, again, by refusing to let people have the view that something happened, Section 230 is a mess. Yeah, court case. Okay, a lot of stuff coming in there. Section 230 is a mess. It's the Streisand effect. So you got to fill me in on what Section 230 is, Kate. Sorry, I'm not 100% sure. Are you referring to Section 230 around? I think you're referring to the Twitter censorship stuff. That's my guess, right? So yeah, that the fact that we have social platforms able to do this, I've gone off on this before, is a whole nother story. We just literally, we've let, by the way, Twitter, Facebook, all those guys are private companies. They have a right to do whatever they want. They have a right to censor whatever they want. They're not obligated by law to be fair, but we assume they were fair. We assume they weren't doing that. So when they now pick one side, which they tend to do, I mean, Facebook's algorithm just came out. They said they're going to, censorship is going to be, their flagging algorithm is going to prioritize Black people, Muslims, LGBTQ, and lower down will be things against Americans, men, white people. Like literally hate speech against them will be lower on the algorithm. It's a fact. They're not making that up. It's their own thing. They're not even hiding it. When you pick a side, when you pick preferences, these social platforms, which we assumed would simply allow all content out there, we're in trouble. And they're going to have to figure out how to fix that. They're going to have to come up with a solution, because it's right now, it's again leading to half the country feeling like their voices can be silenced by a viewpoint that the other side simply doesn't share. Say you don't think lockdowns work, like I've said, I'll get medical misinformation. Why? It's an opinion. Secondly, scientists have said lockdowns aren't working. Thirdly, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not saying COVID isn't real, but even if I was, I should be able to say it, but I'm not. Just saying maybe your strategy to beat it isn't working, So we're in a kind of a mix. I've seen fraud in high school. There's fraud in every election. Of course you've seen fraud. There's been fraud. I'm laughing only because if you think there isn't fraud in presidential elections on both sides, if you think there isn't corruption going on, then you've really bought the big Kool-Aid, not just the left Kool-Aid or the right Kool-Aid. You've bought the big Kool-Aid. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. It's a famous line from Huey Long, who was almost president, ran against Roosevelt. He's a governor, Southern governor, corrupt as heck, but a populist. He might have been good for the times, actually, even now. So that's what we're heading toward, guys. That's the problem we're facing, that we are creating this division and the censorship and the silence, and both sides not being willing to hear the other side are creating this problem where we're just going to keep dividing. And so the suitcases, the implication of suitcases, monkey arms. Why should we defend wild accusations by questionable sources? That's insane. No, well, okay, monkey arms. I would put this back to you. You call them wild accusations by questionable sources. So I'm going to challenge both of those things. And I'll also answer why you would. I could argue that Hillary claiming Trump was an illegitimate president was a wild accusation. I wouldn't call her a questionable source. I wouldn't call Donald Trump or Rudy Giuliani a questionable source. You can laugh at Sidney Powell, the attorney for Michael Flynn, and say she is. But Michael Flynn got railroaded. I mean, we know that now. We know Michael Flynn got railroaded. We know by the FBI's own admissions that they intended to set him up and they didn't think he'd violated the Logan Act or done anything at all wrong as incoming national security advisor, but they wanted to try to see if they could trip him up and get him. And they got him for perjuring. They got him for lying about how much, perhaps inadvertently, when he had talked to the Russian foreign minister, which he actually was allowed to do. Think of how crazy that is. He did something he was allowed to do. They caught him for saying he didn't do it. It's like I'm allowed to go into the store, but I say I didn't, and so you get me for saying I didn't go in the store, but I was totally allowed to. So I don't think they're questionable sources all the time. And why would you defend them? I'm not asking you to defend the monkey arms. I'm asking you to allow them to be heard. Facebook doesn't have to go and choose who's a questionable source. Doesn't have to choose what's a wild accusation. We can make that choice. So monkey arms, you can choose to say something is a wild accusation by a questionable source. That's fine. But Facebook doesn't get to decide I'm a questionable source or my accusation is wild, because it only picks certain ones to do that to. It doesn't pick the other ones. It doesn't pick the ones on. There's wild accusations and questionable sources on both sides. But this is my point. We have to open it up. Yeah, and I think Kate Stock's comment, video evidence, and hundreds of sworn affidavits are not exactly wild accusations from questionable sources. And I guess that'd be my point. Again, both sides, one side's wild accusations and questionable sources are another side's truth. And you can flip it all the way around, because I could make a heck of a good argument about the wild accusations and questionable sources that went after Brett Kavanaugh, which everybody was fine with. If you remember Brett Kavanaugh's hearing, they went from one accusation of a woman who couldn't remember anything other than it was him, including when it happened, and her best friend who says she was with her that night doesn't remember it, to accusations that he was part of gang raping people, and CNN ran those accusations, literally, Remember Michael Avenatti, the attorney who's now all disgraced? He had the client, she accused Kavanaugh of this stuff, and they ran with that. Those were wild accusations that he was part of gang raping people, and they were totally questionable sources. And the mainstream media ran with him day after day. So that is why you would want to allow wild accusations from questionable sources to be out there. I'm not saying you got to believe them, but you got to allow them out there. You don't censor them and go, these we've decided are false. Because by that logic, every one of those accusations to get Brett Kavanaugh, with the exception of Dr. Ford, the first one, which I still think was a little weak, but that one, let's say, was credible. The others were all not credible. People ran with them. The media ran with them. And that's my point. You can't decide which ones you're going to let run with. The media can choose which ones it wants to run with, but don't have social platforms censoring who can or can't say things. And again, if we do, all we're heading for is this great divide. You will all lose in the great divide. Left, right, we'll all lose. Everybody's going to get screwed. That great divide won't help you. Won't help you know which side you're on. And so the sad thing about what's happening right now is that we are so locked in these two camps that we are so determined to not let the other side have a voice, instead of just letting it all come out, that what we are going to see, no matter who wins this election, and I think it will be Biden, is the other half of the country completely convinced that the whole thing was corrupt and stolen. And that is a bad thing for a democracy. That's all I got to say on that. All right, you guys. What Monkey Arms, what did the Hillary campaign file? Didn't Monkey Arms. That was my point. I said that. She didn't file a lot of law cases. Al Gore did, but my point isn't the court cases. You're allowed to file. Everyone's the thing. You're allowed to file court cases. You have it. December 14th is when the electors cast it. You have every right to file all the cases you want. Suddenly going to court has become this thing like, oh, bad you're going to court. It's happened when they started trying to impeach Trump and get him on the Russia collusion. You have every right to go to court. You're allowed to. That's what courts are for. And if the courts throw him out, great. You can go all the way to Supreme Court. And I've said, if the Supreme Court doesn't side with Trump, well, then, it's a more conservative court. So it's more likely to. And if it doesn't, then you're right. Probably wasn't much there. But you have every right to go to court. And the fact that Hillary didn't go to court doesn't mean anything. She called him an illegitimate president. There was they started the resistance right away. They went on the news when it was literally delegitimized Trump's presidency. So again, you can't have it both ways. You can't. Trump got delegitimized for 4 years. And sadly, what's happening now, you're going to see that flip around with Biden. And there's going to be a resistance from the right. And I want to end on this note. Schmore, the majority of Americans are centrist. How can we see each other as sitting in the same boat instead of sinking it? And I just think that is an absolutely great question to ask. Because I do think the majority of us, I don't call myself a centrist, I call myself an independent, but that only means because I don't think there's left, right, and I'm in the middle of left and right. I just am not on left or right. I'm not in either camp. I'm in a big circle here that's everything else. And I think most Americans are more moderate and centrist and looking for common ground. Who wins when we're just in these massive divisions, you know? I mean, even if you go into inner city, in underserved, impoverished communities like I've done, you talk to people, you know, and I did a whole town hall on race in Jacksonville. We're doing another one. You know, when you talk to people, you know, they think there's racial bias. They think there's police brutality that's racially driven. They think there's racism in America, but most of them don't think the protests did anything except just flame things up and make people feel good. They're like, nobody actually changed anything in my community. I still got drive-by shootings. I still don't have economic opportunities. We still have bad healthcare, bad hospitals. We still have schools that suck. We still don't have, you know, real opportunities to grow. And that's what they'll say. And that's what they want. So again, you know, the extremes on either side aren't helping us win. How do we all get in the same boat? Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. But it starts, my answer to that would be, it starts by we recognize that we can't cut the boat in half. You know, it's like that story in the Bible, you know, where King Solomon, who, you know, whatever. Yeah, King Solomon wasn't whatever necessarily the greatest guy either, but you know, but he has the baby and the two women come and they're like, it's my baby. No, it's my baby. And he says, well, you know, here's what we'll do. We'll cut the baby in half. And the woman was like, great. The other one's like, no, you take it. He's like, okay, it's your baby. Like, I mean, it sounds funny, but it's like, right. You know, so you want to cut us in half and we all die, or you want to go, no, listen, I'll give a little to the others. I'll give a little. I'll give a little to the other side. I'll listen to the other side. I'll allow the other side to have its view, and I won't just, you know, rather than sink the whole ship. And if both sides did that, then we don't sink the whole ship. That's how I see it. Because there's otherwise, you're right. We're cutting the baby in half, and we're all going to sink. You know, now the other angle on that is the scorpion and the frog story, right? Scorpion gets on the frog, says, give me a ride across the pond. Frog says, okay, don't bite me. Scorpion's like, I won't. Across the pond they go. Midway through the pond, Scorpion, the frog. So now the frog's going to die. And he said, why did you do that? You're going to kill me, and you're going to kill yourself because you're going to drown too. And Scorpion's like, it's just in my nature. That's what I do. Hopefully that's not what we do. Hopefully we get that we better get above that part of our nature that would rather we all sink than make compromises so that we all stay afloat. Because again, we are one boat and you cut it in half and we all sink. It's really that simple. Wow, that's been fun, you guys. What a fun show. What a really fun show. Love all the interactivity. Crafty, do we have I want to wrap up pretty quick. I'm trying to keep it a little shorter today, but do you want to toss a couple more comments I haven't gotten up? I've been trying to respond to them. Crafty wanted me to respond to more comments in the flow. I like to accommodate what Crafty wants, you know. What Crafty wants, Crafty gets. Not always, actually. Usually doesn't get what he wants. Gets pissed at me probably. But we tried to do it this way. So monkey legs.
Rob, it's a little bit of give and take.
Exactly.
That's how it should
you know
be.
what, Crafty? We're just like America, you know? We're just like America, right? We can't cut the boat in half and sink Rob Nelson live, so we do a give and take.
That's how it should be.
Right? Let's get America to do what we're doing. Monkey Legs Jimmy Stock says the popular vote's completely irrelevant, but you knew that. It is true. And it's monkey arms. Monkey arms, you've been reduced to monkey legs. I don't think that was an intentional diss at you, though. I don't believe it was. But here's the thing I would say about that, Jim Stock. The popular vote is irrelevant according to the Constitution. And I have argued for a long time that's a serious flaw. We should no longer be electing a candidate based on an electoral college. We should elect a candidate based on a popular vote. Technically, because you win more votes, you don't get to be president. It's not set up to be that way. It's intentionally set up to not be that way because I think it had a lot to do with when they when they actually started the country. People didn't have as much access. They also wanted it to be more a representative breakout, not a direct democracy. But I've been a fan of direct democracy for a long time. And I've always argued one person, one vote, that's how you should do it. It would change how people campaign. The irony is you might not actually see the same outcome. Hillary won the popular vote. I don't think Hillary would have won the popular vote if she'd had to campaign. You can't take, you have to campaign differently when you're campaigning for the popular vote versus now being able to isolate out states. And it would change the outcome of things. And it would change how much people vote. Like states like California, a lot of times Republicans might not vote as much because they think it's not going to matter unless the down ballot races really matter to them. So I'm for the popular vote. But as of right now, unfortunately, it doesn't actually matter. Oh, yes, the whole thing with Fort Walton Bleach, aliens catch up. I want to just go on this alien thing for a second. And this is, again, this goes back to people who say wild conspiracy theories. I want to use the aliens as an example to tie back to that. Because, for a long time, people would have said you're a kook if you thought there were aliens. You're a kooky conspiracy theorist person if you think there's aliens. Now, what we found out before they started releasing this more recent stuff in the last few years of the Pentagon and the military, credible sightings, acknowledging that they are things they can't explain. They're not ours. They're not other countries. They're not just things somebody's seeing that's not really there. They're not light formations. They're actual crafts. And that the military is acknowledging in some cases it's possible they're not human. But when Roswell happened, and the craft fell into Roswell, that became the beginning of the UFO conspiracy theory stuff. You can FO. This was FO, Freedom of Information Act, and now you can go see it. The Department of Defense came up with guidelines for how to deal with unidentified flying object sightings, and one of the things they said to do was to immediately discredit whoever said they saw it. They actually said that people should go to the press, discredit them, make them out to be kooks, wacky conspiracy theorists. Why did they do that? Because they knew that they knew what they had seen wasn't just random. If you weren't worried it was real, you'd be like, just ignore them. They're kooky. They actually went, if somebody says they've seen something, discredit them in the public, discredit them in the press, make them out to be wacky conspiracy theorists. Now we know UFOs are not wacky conspiracy theorists. We know because our own military and, commercial pilots and people with a lot of credibility who aren't drunk or staring at the thing or making stuff up are going, we saw this stuff. Multiple planes saw it. Multiple people in different jets saw it. We can't explain it. We checked. It's nobody's. We've got pictures of it. We've analyzed it. It was real and we can't explain it. On the kooky conspiracy theory part 2, for many years, people thought it was a kooky conspiracy that more than one person, and some people still do, had killed Kennedy. That, that if you thought it was a conspiracy, you were a kooky conspiracy person. Well, in fact, more people now think there was a conspiracy, but I have a personal angle on this one. I went and asked Joe Kennedy, the former Congressman Joe Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy's son, who at the time was a member of Congress, what he thought. And he said, everyone in the Kennedy family thinks that it was more than one person. And I was like, why don't you do more to make, he's like, what difference would it make? It wouldn't bring my uncle back, wouldn't change anything. But I did a second leg on that one. And in law school, one of my professors, John Ely, who's now passed, was the clerk to the Warren Commission. The clerk is the person who's like right there for everything. You're like top of your class at Harvard, Stanford, Yale, whatever, you can be a clerk if they pick you. And the Warren Commission is what created the report on the Kennedy assassination. And I asked him one day, we were sitting in his office, and I said, what you guys did in concluding only one person acted, Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Did you really believe that? Is that really, you really thought that was true? And I thought he'd be like, of course we thought it was true. And he looked at me and he said, we did what we had to do at the time to keep people okay. Meaning, we didn't want to say it's a conspiracy and we can't figure it out, which again, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to wonder how Lee Harvey Oswald would have gotten those shots off that quickly and how one bullet managed to go through the front seat into, through the back seat, through Governor Connolly's leg, the front seat, turn around and come back through and hit the president, like the magic bullet, as they called it. So when you say I'm crazy conspiracy theorists, because people say there's fraud, most I don't buy most conspiracies, but just because people think something you don't agree with doesn't make it a crazy conspiracy, because a whole lot of things come to light later on that were hidden from us at the time. And yes, those will be the conspiracies that prove to be true. Just because it's a conspiracy theory doesn't mean it isn't actually true. It's a conspiracy theory. Like, if it's a conspiracy theory, it's kooky. Conspiracy theory just means you think there's a conspiracy, and often there is. Okay, so Jim Stock, 4 years of the left making Trump supporters, and now we all supposed to come together and feel the divide. It's just nuts. Yes and no, Jim Stock. I agree, and I understand that. I understand the anger of the people on the right. My friend Judd Dunning says it all the time. Don't expect me to suddenly be nice now. But here's the thing. Both sides are going to have to figure out how. And I don't expect people on the right to do it if people on the left are going to keep saying everything you say is wackadoodle crazy. But if both sides don't find some common ground, we will just cut the boat in half. So it's going to take both sides. It's like, the Middle East in peace. Like, neither side wanted to give any room to the other. No, you've been screwing us forever. Well, no, at a certain point, you got to go. We got to find the common ground. And that means both sides, not one side. And Monkey Arms, I like you're putting it out there, keeping the dialogue going. To Kate Stock, where do you want to meet halfway? I want to pop your compromise cherry. What the compromise? Okay, so we got an offer out there on the table from Monkey Arms to Kate, wanting to find a compromise. So let's end this with one quick compromise. If you're still out there, or Monkey Arms, if you are, pop up what, okay, Kate, but you're getting an offer for a compromise. Yeah, but Kate, I'm going to say this, again, and we got to wrap up because we're over our time. But again, Democrats, convenient to have healing now. Yes, Kate, you're right. It is. But that's why I'm saying both sides are going to have to make compromise to make this work. So the Dems can't just go, hey, guys, unify with us. It's going to take both sides meeting somewhere that's not comfortable for them. So Dems may want unity, but you're going to have to give a lot to the right to get them to agree to meet you in the middle for that unity. All right, Crafty, I know we're out of time. We're over. Love all your guys' comments. We're going to keep it going on Reddit afterward. And sorry if I didn't get to all your comments, but love the interactivity, love the feedback. Seriously think about what we're just talking about here, guys. Just think about what you could give, what you could do that would meet someone you don't agree with. Start by not just calling him an idiot. Start by not just saying everything they say is kooky on either side. Let's start there if we can. Okay.
That's Kate's suggestion right there for compromise.
Audit with signatures, all the swing state. Why is that a problem? I don't know that that's Kate's suggestion, but I agree with that. I think we could audit with signatures. If that is your suggestion, Kate, I think that's a good one. Audit with swing signatures, all the swing states. I think that's a fair thing to ask. But I think the compromise I'm talking about literally comes person to person, guys. It's one-on-one. It's each of us individually deciding to make a compromise. All right, guys, we'll keep going and going. And Crafty has flashed me that you are over your time limit. So in the spirit of compromise, I love all your comments. Oh, I don't want to leave without an offer for Monkey Arms. Crafty, can we go 60 more seconds?
Yep, you got
60 more seconds. Kate, if you are out there, which I think you are, Monkey Arms is asking for a position that would be like a compromise, meet in the middle. What would that be for you? And again, maybe something you two actually do on social media. Maybe it's an individual one-on-one, is it you? Do I got to offer up what it is? You got one for me, Kate? You got something that would be a compromise? No, I don't think that's Kate's offer. I think that's Kate's suggestion. All right. Monkey Arms, I'm going to try to get one. Monkey Arms, I'm going to try to get one. We're going to try to get it for next week. We're going to try to see if we can get a compromise that would be something you guys as viewers could do even to start finding a common ground. But I'm going to suggest it might be literally we set up some kind of chat room and you guys start having an actual dialogue where you try to figure out how much you can acknowledge the validity of what the other side is saying. All right, you guys, love this show. Love the interactivity. Absolutely fantastic. You guys are great. Appreciate you all listening to me, sharing this. I'm all about creating the dialogue, you guys. I don't pretend to have all the answers. Anybody who does is crazy. I do have a lot of opinions. That's my job. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to stir things up. But honestly, the one thing I do know is we cut the boat in half. We all sink. So it doesn't matter how right you are, or left you are, or how sure you are of your right or left position. If we cut the boat in half, we all sink. So we better figure out how to keep it together. I'm Rob Nelson. Thanks for watching.